Well, new data just released on how the U.S. economy performed in the second quarter. And as expected, the country's gross domestic product, which is the total monetary value of all the finished goods and services produced by the U.S., shrank by 0.9%. And yes, that is the second straight quarter of this kind of economic decline. So that dip, it is significant in that it represents, again, the second straight quarter of negative growth, which in some economic quarters, according to some folks, is the definition of a recession. So this number this morning basically fueling fears that a recession is coming or fears that we are already in one, depending on to whom you talk. Newsy economics correspondent Bianca Fascini is joining us now with more on these numbers. So let every economic and the analyst in the country now talk to a reporter and spin these numbers and say where we are. But what is your sober assessment of what this report says and doesn't say?
Hey, Rob, good morning. So as you said, GDP is down in the second quarter of the year by 0.9%. That's between April and June of this year. Now, this sort of, this comes after a wide range of estimates, first of all. Some economists were expecting slight growth by 0.3 to 0.4%. Meanwhile, some other economists, like the Atlanta Fed, for example, were expecting a bigger contraction by over 1%. So this number sort of comes in the middle. It is better than what we saw in the prior quarter. The first quarter of the year, we saw the economy contract by 1.6%. So this is a slight improvement, but nonetheless could certainly amp up some of those fears about a recession. But one thing I do want to point out that I think is really important for everyone to understand is that the only economists that officially call a recession are at the National Bureau of Economic Research. It's not anybody at the White House or in Congress or anyone else in Washington. And according to the NBER, they define a recession as a significant decline in economic activity that is spread across the economy and lasts more than a few months. But they consider a variety of factors. It's not just explicitly two quarters of falling GDP that means we are officially in a recession. So we can definitely expect lots of talk about that here in Washington and beyond, but this does not mean that we are officially in a recession. One factor to consider, though, is consumer spending. The latest data does show that it's up 1%. And the reason I point this out is because consumer spending is a really big chunk of the U.S. economy. So if we see consumer spending start to falter, that could be a worrying sign. But this report, of course, is just the advanced reading. Over the next couple of months, we'll get updated readings to see if these numbers have changed, and that will give us more of an idea of whether or not we should continue to see more contractions in the future, or if we'll finally see a turnaround in the third and fourth quarter of the year.